Safe, for now, within our siloed pods. Each browser and live stream and video chat a window into those near and far whom we cannot touch. Those we love and those we wish to love. Those we know and those we wish to know, or to never know. We all slowly ascend this surreal roller coaster as it clicks and clacks and thrums its way to a gruesome peak and the headlong fall to come. Some of us buckle in, strap and grip tightly, knowing the ride will be as rough as we've heard, as we've been warned, or as we've personally predicted. With set jaws, we turn to each other and say, "Here we go. See you on the other side." But some of us do not lock the seat bar firmly at our laps. Some joke and jape that this ride is child's play. They've ridden before and have no fear of the descent. They're healthy and strong and can take whatever loop and whirl and breakneck turn this thing has to offer. Only when they are flung from the seat, tumbling into oblivion, will they realize this was no ordinary ride. Some of them, in their sudden, jarring realization, will desperately grab onto one of their neighbors for purchase, but succeed only in dragging their seatmate or neighbor out into the void as well. Their selfishness and lack of foresight a curse, not only on them, but all those unfortunate enough to have found themselves near. As they flail, falling, they now know why the nickname of this ride was the Black Swan. Even those well-braced find that the track is unfinished. There is no coasting back to a slow stop with a deep sigh of relief. There's only going down, the harsh landing, the personal and group and family damage report, after which we pick each other up, count the survivors, and patch our wounds. As we flee, like refugees of a war that we paid for but did not see, we see this ride, indeed the entire amusement park, is crumbling, and it has been, for years, for decades. And we know and swear with a solemn vow that we will not rebuild. We will leave this cursed ground far behind to build anew, a park better and safer, free to all who enter with kind heart, open mind, and hands willing to work in their own way as much as they are able. We have ridden the Black Swan, and now we build the Red Dawn. We rise. My name is Logan Grendel, and you have returned to the Focused on Infinity podcast. Let's talk about it. Coming to you from Harlem on the 22nd of March, 2020. The current numbers on COVID that I'm getting from ncov2019.live, a great website to follow for up-to-the-minute global numbers on the spread of the novel coronavirus COVID-19, compiled from a number of reputable sources and aggregated. The current numbers are that there are 345,036 confirmed cases, with 14,739 confirmed deaths, with 9,064 still in serious condition, and 97,955 recovered. A conversation I've had frequently in the past few days, via text for the most part, has been that whatever numbers we have, whatever numbers we get, they're going to be behind, right? The bad thing about science, if there can be said to be a bad thing, and I mean the scientific method, not the body of knowledge that we consider as science, but the bad thing about using the scientific method properly is that you're always going to be behind, right? If I call everyone I know and get all the information that I can get and do an excellent job of fact-checking and verifying and making sure that what I'm putting out there is real, and then I do finally put it out, well, in that time, the numbers that I've got, they're old, right? They're not current. And this is the case with everything that we have about COVID-19. And this is exactly why what we should be doing is looking at countries that are basically ahead of where we are, right? I have been taking all of my cues, not from what people are saying in this country, but from what I've heard come out of China and out of Italy, because those are the places where there has been the most on-the-ground information that I've been able to see. Italy, of course, much more than China, seeing as how Italy is not as repressive of a government. And as I read you in the previous episode, that information was quite dire. And as a result, I've reduced my social footprint for about 2 weeks now and have been socially distancing and wearing gloves, etc., taking every step that I can personally to minimize my effect on these growing numbers. But unfortunately, I was pretty much alone in the beginning. Myself and a few other people that I know, especially those of us that are preppers or otherwise dystopian catastrophists or doomsayers in some way, have been watching this and thinking, let's do a little games theory here. Let's see what is the most likely outcome given the trajectory we're on and the information we have. Because that's really what we should always be doing. We always want to be looking forward. And that doesn't mean not living in the current moment, as the love and light peddlers try and tell you. It just means that we are using the present moment to put our future selves in the best position possible, right? We're not just looking at things as if we're like a goldfish, like we're just going around the little plastic castle inside our bowl and not realizing every time we see it that it's the same plastic castle. No, we're looking ahead and we're saying, okay, that looks like a mountain coming up. Let me make sure that I have some climbing equipment. That looks like a waterfall coming up. Let me make sure I have some kind of raft or some kind of boat. And failing to do that is failing yourself and those around you. So a lot of what I'm going to say right now, I acknowledge that it's a little bit late in the game to even be saying. But my hope is that the first half of this episode is going to be the last warning that some people need to hear. So the first half of this episode is called Black Swan. The piece of writing that I read you, I wrote just before I started recording this, because it's kind of what was coming into my head. The imagery is how I feel about this entire situation. And I thought it would be better to read something that I had written rather than just freestyle, basically, as I ordinarily do. I usually come in with notes, etc., but I don't have large chunks written. I just do things off the top of my head because it feels more honest to me to do it that way. But I wanted to come into this with something that felt a little bit more intentional because of how very real and how very vital and how indeed very dangerous this moment is. Now, what is a Black Swan event? A Black Swan event is something that has a giant, massive effect and essentially seems to come out of nowhere, and people couldn't have predicted it necessarily, or most people could not have predicted it, and or, after it's over, they'll say they could not have predicted it. Basically, it's something that is a sudden, sharp shock, and after which the world is not the same again, whether it is for one person or for the world at large or for a country, etc. A Black Swan event is something that is, at base, going to change everyone's life, for better or for worse, but ordinarily it's usually for worse, at least at first. So brace yourself, because the first part of this is not going to be very uplifting. It's going to be quite the opposite. But stay with me, because there is a method to my madness, as it were. I wrote a graphic novel, wrote and shot and edited and released a graphic novel called Harlequin's Song a long while ago. And it was based on a series of dreams I had predicting that there would be a stock market crash and some sort of pathogen that was going to seriously affect the system and the world to the point where it would largely collapse. Now, I had the time frame wrong. I thought this was all going to kick off around 2008. And it was after a friend of mine, a few years later said to me like, well, the stock market did crash in 2008, but then we had the stimulus package. And so we just kind of kept things going. And so it could have happened then, but it didn't. And I was like, you know what, I guess you're right. But part of me, though I felt like it was still coming, I felt like I had been wrong. And so I should just stop catastrophizing. I'm not sure if that's a real word, but I like it. But then, when we first started getting wind of COVID-19, and I saw that first video from the doctor in China, my first thought was, here we go. Because there's no way that something like this was not going to get out of control, especially when it hit this country. And America is a combination of basically the exact wrong factors for something like this. We have the largest population of a special kind of Christian that doesn't believe in science, that believes that God is going to take care of everything, and so, weirdly, our actions don't matter as much. A kind of thinking that believes that certain people are inherently better or more virtuous or worth more survival than others. A kind of Christianity that believes more in the coming rapture, and that the chosen people of God will all be whisked away somewhere safe while the rest of us suffer. We also have a society which is essentially anti-intellectual. And that's always been America. That's not new, right? There is a theory that some of the modern American accent, some of the way that we use words, were directly intended to be in contrast to the way that they were spoken in England. Right? That we were a more rough-hewn and down and rugged kind of folk. And so we weren't as frilly with our language. That strain of anti-intellectualism has run pretty deep. And now it's gotten out of control. Now we have people who, for example, refuse to vaccinate their children. And just for 1 second, a brief aside. It is just as illogical to refuse to vaccinate your children as it is to not acknowledge that there is something very seriously wrong with our healthcare system. That there is good reason not to trust these doctors who are changing things every year and just giving your child whatever they are being told to give them, right? Two things can be true at once. But let's just leave that alone for now. The strain of anti-intellectualism, it means that some people think they're being cute or clever when they're like, you know what? The CDC is saying, let's do this or that. But what do they know? You know what I mean? I'm good. I'll just walk around. I'll go and lick some subway poles. Let's lick them, right? These people are flying in the face of things just because they don't get science when it comes down to it, right? And there is a cavalier and egotistical thing to it in a lot of cases, and in other cases, it's just a response to fear. Some people deal with fear by pretending that they don't feel it. Some people deal with fear by pretending that it doesn't have an effect on them, and they're just going to do the exact opposite, as in, it's like, fuck fear. You know, I don't believe in that shit. Forget it. Can't scare me. And they're, of course, playing directly into their fears. And even more importantly, they're playing into the danger. They're falling victim to the danger. There's nothing wrong with fear. There is nothing wrong with the emotion that more than any other keeps you alive and keeps you safe, right? Fear is not a bad thing. No emotion is a bad thing. No part of the human experience, no part of the things that we generate naturally from within us is inherently bad. It can be bad, and it can cause us to have actions which are not good, but it's those individual actions, not the feelings, that make something good or bad. So, and I mean, I suppose that, you know, the two things I just listed, the evangelical Christian right and the anti-intellectualism, those are kind of two sides of the same coin, might even be sort of the same side of the same coin. Then we also have, though, people who do believe some of what's being said, but they think they can mitigate it through this way or that way. You know, I can still mostly go about things the way that I do them, but I'll just take some extra precautions, right? But those people are also wrong. I saw a meme the other day that said they told people in Italy it was okay to go jogging too. It's not. I think we need to treat COVID-19 more like a hurricane or like a blizzard. Maybe this particular storm is going to last longer, and has a different nature of affecting us. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. Nature is doing something, and it's doing it wildly, and it's doing it ferociously outside our doors. And what are we supposed to do when that's happening? Stay the fuck inside. Let nature work its magic. Let it work out whatever it's working out. And when it's done, then we can go back to business, to whatever we think that business is and should be. But not a second before. Now, I don't extend that to the people that have no choice but to go out in it. And if nothing else, this crisis shows us who really is holding our lives together, who is the glue that really holds our society together. And I got news for you. It's not a CEO. It's not a supposed job creator. It's not even a politician. Most of these politicians are asleep at the wheel, or even worse, actively trying to hold back efforts to get us what we need. With very few exceptions, the politicians that are in office right now, they are proving what useless and feckless pieces of trash they are by not fighting hard, demanding, filibustering, knocking down doors, whatever they got to do. In this emergency situation, they should be at very least on every channel and on every live stream telling us what they're doing to make sure that we're going to be okay. But most of them aren't. Most of them, like the greedy and rapacious vultures that they are, most of them have just taken a lot of their winnings and have retreated somewhere that they can ride this out in safety. Because let's face it, they didn't ever care about us. What they wanted was the money. And being a politician and getting that sweet, sweet lobbyist money is one of the best ways to get dough in the world the way that it is currently constituted. Besides the anti-intellectualism and the people who think that they know better and the people who are even understanding it, downplaying the whole situation, you also have the overarching specter of corruption. Now, our society, it's positively riddled with corruption from top to bottom. We have so much corruption that we don't even consider obvious nepotism corruption anymore. Plenty of otherwise intelligent people, when they see that someone got a job because of who their parents were or who their uncle was, etc., they just say, oh yeah, that's how it goes. That's the way of the world. No, that's corruption. The person who gets each job is supposed to be the person who is most qualified for that job. And yes, I get looking out for your people and the people that you love, but that's not how you do it. You don't do it by fucking over somebody else more deserving. Because whenever you do that, you're also fucking over the people who they're doing that job for, right? The people have the right to have the best person for the job at any time doing that job in every way, from big to small. All those things combined with our lack of healthcare, which is also down to corruption largely, because we all want it, right? And even people who didn't see it before, they are seeing it now and they are shouting it from the rooftops, right? Even the people who just recently were saying, well, I have good healthcare from my job, so no universal health, no Medicare for all, forget it. Well, a lot of them have been laid off. And when you get laid off, you lose your healthcare. And may the gods shame everyone who thinks like this, because that's how we keep getting into these troubles. People don't pay attention to a problem until it's a problem for them. And don't get me wrong, this exceptionalism is part of what America is and has been. Because how many of you cared that people in Syria or Yemen have for the past, I'm not sure how many years, have been running for their lives, have been fleeing explosions? The kind of storm that they have been fleeing from is an entirely man-made one. And we are the men making it. 51 cents out of every one of our tax dollars, to borrow a term from the internet, 51 cents out of every one of our tax dollars has been going to making Yemenis and Palestinian and Syrian and Iraqi children into skeletons. And those of us even who knew that, we did not do anything about it. We did not even speak up about it, right? So that's one of the reasons that COVID is causing such fear, It's one of the reasons also that Donald Trump caused so much fear. It's because certain people, certain sections of the population had never known fear personally. They had never been in a situation where they could actually see some kind of wave about to wash over them, right? Your let's go back to brunch squad. You motherfuckers are complicit. Complicit as all hell. Because let me tell you something. There are some people who have been right all along. They have been sounding the alarms about how the things that we are doing are going to affect us all later, and how we shouldn't have been doing them in the first place, and how it is essentially a banal form of evil to allow those things to happen in our names. But y'all didn't want to hear that, did you? Because you were living too good, too easy. Couple dollars to the ACLU every month, and your conscience is clean. Well, whatever. Like they say, you're going to learn today. So America is the worst place for the coronavirus disease to show up. Because instead of a full lockdown like China had, or a slow and too late lockdown like Italy had, but with a universal healthcare system in place to mitigate the fact that so many people were going to be sick, and also that when they did get sick, they knew they could just go and be treated. No matter how bad things are in Italy, it could have been much, much, much worse if they did not have a universal healthcare system. And so there are some people who are trying to use the fact that they have a universal healthcare system and yet are suffering as a reason, to use as a cudgel against Medicare for all here. And those people, there is a special place in all hells where they will be torn apart for 1,000 times 1,000 years by the 17 jackals of the ending times. And I don't even know what that is. I just made that up. I've never heard such a myth, but that's where they're going. Because the opposite thing should be the lesson we take from that. Italy is what happens when you have in place a way to take care of all your citizens as much as you can, but you just get overwhelmed. But here, you have people who are out on the beach, drunk as hell, rubbing up against all and sundry, sweating, laughing, giggling, dancing on a beach during the ascending phase of what they know to be a global pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of these people are very young. And honestly, it's someone who's like 18, 19, even 20 years old. If you've been like living with your parents your whole life and haven't really had the experience of being adult on your own, etc., I can't blame you as much as I blame your parents, who should have been like, hey, it's my job to teach you not what to think, but how to think, right? It's my job to protect you. You're not fucking going to spring break. And I don't care by hook or by crook, your ass, you will not be on a beach. No. Bring your ass home and let's hunker down or whatever. Go and hole up with your friends somewhere. I'll send you some money for food. Just stay there, right? But no. Instead, we have a contagion bomb on the beach where somebody on each one of those beaches, by the odds of it, had COVID-19. We know that COVID-19 can live for 3 hours in the air. Go back to the previous episode, the Panic, for the breakdown of the difference between something being airborne and being aerosolized. But it can live in the air for 3 hours. It can live on copper for 4 hours. It can live on cardboard for 24 hours. So anything you're receiving, you might want to give it a little spray before you bring it in, or use gloves when you're unboxing and unbox it outside. On stainless steel, it can live for 2 to 3 days. So that means if you're on the subway for 2 to 3 days, there could be coronavirus in that subway car. And you rub up against it, you touch it with your hand, and there you go. It could have been someone on there 2.5 days ago, but now you've got it. It can live on plastic for 3 full days. So just given those, oh, by the way, that comes from the New England Journal of Medicine. It's published in Business Insider. So given what we already know, which is not even the full picture of it because we're still unfolding what this disease has to offer, which I guess is a peculiar way of putting it, but you get me. We know that it is highly virulent, right? That it's probably more difficult not to get from hanging out with someone, even sharing air with someone, than it is to get. There was a story of a guy who did everything right. He started a couple of weeks ago with social distancing. And in that time, the only thing he did wrong, air quotes, wrong, is that he met up with a friend and they sat outside at a pub, didn't sit near each other, sat like across from each other at the recommended social distance, didn't share anything, didn't shake hands, nothing. But as it turns out, his friend had it, and now he has it, and now he's in the fucking hospital. This is the Black Swan event for America. 40 years ago, definitely 50 years ago, even before that, no one would think there was a possibility that America was going to collapse. The United States empire is the largest and most powerful empire the world has ever seen. And when people look back, a lot of them who are now saying we're going to be just fine will say, oh yeah, I knew it all along. No, the fuck you didn't. Okay? But there are some of us who have been watching this train rolling down the tracks, and we've been warning you. All it takes is a good push for this wobbling Jenga tower of a country we have to collapse into a bunch of shards. And not only are we getting one of those pushes, right? COVID-19 is one push, but then there's the stock market, right? COVID's pushing the stock market, and it's like a little back and forth dance between the two, and they're going to exacerbate each other until the point when, mark my words, this country will not be able to bear the strain. Sometime soon. And look, I know a lot of us think, hey, we're going to quarantine for a couple weeks, no problem, and it's going to be a little bit lonely, but we'll be okay. You're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself, and I'm not going to let you keep doing it. Just think about it mathematically. Think about it scientifically. Just think about it reasonably, rationally. And here's the thing. Don't let your fear cause you to pretend that you're not worried, right? And I know that sounds counterintuitive, right? But when we're afraid of something, one of the best things to do is push the thought away until we absolutely have to deal with it. No. Grab the worst case scenario by the ears, look it in the face, and know that that's what's coming. Let's think about it. Our economy was already falsely buoyed. All the gains in the stock market have been basically because these businesses have been buying their own stocks and falsely inflating the profits and the numbers, and they keep doing it back and forth and playing games amongst each other. Kind of like how when some people put out a book, they will buy up all the copies so it looks like it's a bestseller, even though nobody fucking wants the book, right? The stock market does a similar thing. It's a lie. And thankfully, most of us are not actually connected to it, right? I think it's like less than 10% of people actually have stocks. But because of the capitalist oligarchy we have, whenever their businesses feel pain, they make us pay for it. Every time. And that was one of the things for which I can never forgive Obama. That first bailout. And people still think, oh, no, he had to do it, otherwise everything would have gone down. That's bullshit. Nothing ever trickles down. The only thing that trickles down is water. Money, the monetary system, everything works from the bottom up. Why do you think the economy is tanking so hard right now? Is it because a few CEOs aren't doing as well? Or is it because everyone has to stay at home and the workers can't work? Our society is not built for this because capitalism is not built for this. Capitalism is the problem. In any other society, and I'm talking about ages old, if you had a group of people who had gotten together and were, even if it was just a tribe or something, and there's a pandemic that goes through, everybody stops what they're doing. They take care of each other. They share all their food, their goods, right? They create new services. They create new infrastructure for what needs to be done, and they just do it. And nobody is worried about what they're going to do to pay their rent, how they're going to pay their bills. Nobody has to worry about that because it's understood that there is something bigger going on. But look at us. Even those of us who are trying to do the right thing, we're worried about how we're going to pay next month's rent. We're worried about how we're going to buy food. We're worried about how we're going to take care of ourselves. And we have taken this systemic problem and individualized it. And that's what they want us to do. What they want us to do is take their failures into our own hearts. You cannot and must not do that. There should be a moratorium, and I don't mean a postponement. I mean a literal moratorium on all bills right now, right? What is the point of having a government? What is the point of putting all of our money together if it's not for something like this? What's the point? The only reason that we have any kind of society, that we get together, is to do things that we could not do alone. And one of those things is to take care of everyone during a crisis of this nature and of this level. We gave $1.5 trillion to the stock market for them to blow it in 20 minutes, thinking that that would do something. That's not what a society is for. And that's why this event is proving that we have failed, that capitalism has failed. And I don't mean we individually have failed, because even though we do take a lot of that into our hearts and we do have a lot of that thinking stuck in our heads, we can do better. There's absolutely no way that our stock market will rebound. And I'll tell you why. First of all, besides the fact that it's fake, right? We're going to, this lockdown, this shutdown, this social distancing, whatever it is, whatever it's being called. And we can talk about why a lockdown may have been better than just social distancing. This period's not going to be over in 2 weeks. Okay? In 2 weeks, we're just going to start seeing how bad it is. In 2 weeks, we're all going to know somebody who has it or someone who has died from it. And I know that sounds like a rough thing to say, but it's true, right? The numbers that we have in America are deflated. They are vastly deflated. We don't have enough tests. We don't have the infrastructure necessary to know what the real numbers are. So this is going to last for longer than 2 weeks. It's going to last for longer than a month. It's probably going to last for no fewer than 2 months. And that's 2 months that things are going to keep getting worse in the interim. Prepare yourself, people. This is really what's coming, right? Things are going to be okay-ish for a while, and then people are going to keep getting sicker, and then our healthcare system, they're almost out of masks and gloves already, okay? So whatever numbers they had in China, especially in terms of the mortality rate, percentage-wise, we're going to have people dying here from cases that could have been prevented if we just had these services to handle them, or if the people had not been afraid to go to the doctor because they knew they couldn't afford the treatment. We're going to have people dying because of the spike in infections that we caused over the last week. And again, I put most of that on our leaders. Every governor who said something should just keep going on. every governor who said they weren't going to shut things down because of the effect that would have on the economy. I'm looking at you, fucking Cuomo. All right. At the time of me recording this, New York has 50% of the cases in America. That could have been slowed down a lot by starting at very least the social distancing and mandatory shutdown of all non-essential businesses, like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, at least a week ago. The CDC has been saying it for quite some time, and instead, the cruelty, I can hardly say this without getting like tears of anger, because the cruelty of running the elections in Arizona and Florida and Illinois, you can think what you want about that. And of course, you will hear pundits saying that the only reason that some people didn't want them to go on was because it was bad for Bernie. That is such a disingenuous and fucked up thing to say. No, we wanted them not to go on because it is going to kill people. People are going to die because of that. And instead of flattening the curve, we attached that thing to the fucking spaceship Challenger and launched it to watch it explode. And it's gonna explode. You know that what I'm saying is true. And the worst part about it was that they closed a bunch of polling places rather than making there more polling places that were well appointed and well sanitized and giving all the poll workers instructions on how to best keep themselves and the voters safe. They instead did none of that. They crammed people in to these small places, rubbing their greasy fingers all over the same COVID-covered pencils that you use in the booths. Most of the poll workers are 60 years old or older. That's cruelty. That's corruption. And all those decisions were made by the DNC because there weren't even any Republican primaries to be held. So you can't blame that on the evil Republicans. Not only did the DNC mandate that it go on, but they're going to take away delegates from Ohio for having the audacity to defy a court order and say they were not going to kill people by forcing them to participate in a primary during a global pandemic. It's not just a bad decision. It's not just, oh, whoops, we couldn't have known. I'm going to quote Ani DeFranco and say, everything is governed by the rule of one thing leads to another. Yes, you could have known that getting a bunch of people together, especially while every other place was closed already, was going to create a situation where more people would be exposed to the pathogen. Contagion bombs all over the country. Contagion bombs. And also, we have people who, I got a message from someone today who told me they were in church and they would get back to me after they got out of church. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? And you know what they said? God got me. God may have you. Does he have the person sitting next to you in the pew that's not as healthy as you are? Or does God have all 15 people you're going to run into when you go to the supermarket and maybe hand it off to them? And that's the shit of it, where it's like, you can't just do whatever the fuck you want to do because you think you've got it all under control. And look, I say this as a self-declared witch. The gods do not want you to ignore reality. The gods do not want you to ignore the tools at your disposal for discerning the best course of action. They definitely do not want you to forsake your responsibility to do the best you can by everyone that you come into contact with in this life. We are social creatures. We have a responsibility to each other. That whole bullshit about not owing anyone anything, that's bullshit. We owe each other everything at all moments, at all times. We survive because we all are doing something to help each other survive in ways great and small every day. So spare me the individualist, exceptionalist bullshit, because that is exactly why we're going down. But let's keep talking about why we won't be able to come back from this. My job, for example, it's finished, right? I have spent the last 10 years building a business and was able to become successful at it and hire other people and become one of those proverbial job creators, etc., give myself a better standard of living, all those things. But just like that, it's gone. I can't walk around in the streets with dogs. And I know that people want to say that, oh, well, you could just wear gloves and, you could make sure not to handle the leashes and blah, blah, blah. And I even saw an email talking about how professional dog walkers should handle walking during this crisis. First of all, I started my business not to make money. I mean, obviously that was a concern, sure. But my thing has always been to study the dog human history and to do what is best for dogs and the humans that love them. And the best thing about this moment is that dogs are as happy as they've ever been. Their humans are home. We are where we should have been this whole time. The one thing I've always said in training, a lot of people come to trainers for separation anxiety in their dogs. And the first thing I always say to those people is that we call it separation anxiety as if there is something inherently wrong with the dog for having it. But really what it is that dogs got the job by following us around. They got the job by staying with us through thick and thin, through all conditions, through all weathers, whether we are kings or whether we are destitute. The one thing they've never understood is why we have to leave them for 8+ hours a day. They're not built for just being alone all the time, right? It's not like there's something broken about them because they're whining or scratching because you're not there. But now the humans are home. That is just one example of how we are accidentally returning, or not returning, but moving towards the world that we should have. But at any rate, my business is done for. And people are like, what are you going to do? Are you terrified? Are you like, what do you, what's your plan? Like, how are you going to make money? And I'm like, that's the least of my fucking worries right now. Like, are you kidding me? Right? Like, I'm worried about how many people I know are going to die. I'm worried about the situation, the condition of the world. I'm worried about the crime rate spiking in a month as people realize that they're not getting saved, that supplies are running out, that jobs are not coming back, and that their hopes are dwindling. I'm worried about the fact that everyone who lives in New York City really needs to think about the fact that we need to start putting in place community situations that will be sustainable without the help of government and without the help of anyone but ourselves. I'm worried about the fact that our life will never be recognizable again. You're worried about a rent bill? Really? You got to think a little bit more broadly. First of all, just a problem that is a problem for everyone becomes a problem for no one, right? Like, you're not going to be special in how your landlord comes after you because you can't pay your rent, right? That's kind of how, like I said earlier, capitalism gets in your brain and makes you individualize a systemic problem. No, what you should be doing is calling for that moratorium on rents. Not for you, or at least not just for you, but for everyone, because that's what we should do, right? I'm not worried about that kind of stuff because, first of all, I mean, I'm in better shape than a lot of people because I've literally been dreaming about and preparing for this and, for a long time. But beyond that, my concern is that we don't realize that this is what happens when an empire is about to collapse. That's the tension that you feel right now. It's not just loneliness. It's not just isolation. What you feel is a deeper sort of, it's a thread that's running through all of our collective unconscious. You feel that we're about to enter the birth pangs of a new world. But this is not a birth that is going to come easily. It is not a birth that is going to come without pain. It is not one that's even assured. We don't know that victory is assured. We don't. We don't know that survival is assured. We don't. This is the Black Swan event for the American experiment. And going back to where the term Black Swan event came from, it came from a long time ago when someone, when people had never seen a black swan, and so they assumed that there was no such thing as a black swan. And then when they saw one, it was like, oh my God. Well, we never could have known that existed. But there was always someone that had been around black swans and knew that there were black swans. Probably that person had told them, But they were just like, oh, get out of here. I never seen that. And I know that it's like that with some of you right now. Especially some of you who are a little bit better off, some more moderate types, etc., etc. Like you really feel like in your heart that things are going to go back to finger quotes normal. But you're kidding yourself. And you need to get ready just like the rest of us. And you need to realize that you are part of the rest of us. We are all in this together. And that's going to bring me to the second half of Black Swan, Red Dawn. And that's the positive end of where we're going right now.
Damn, Jay, don't kill him.
Yeah. You can check me long as you bring your receipt. But it appears to me shit most of you can't read. Tragic. Ancestor wouldn't have it. The middle passage to disregarding passages that's classless. Steph Reed's arm tat, arm stacked, powerful leader. King Leon X speeches screaming. Readers are leaders, books is fine, but read between the lines too. I mean it. Cross-reference text, words will lie to you. I done seen it. Most my friends are authors, from the Akeens to Akina, from the Logans to Ikea, Liftbridge, publishing Isaiah. Had to do some unlearning, merge my faith with my reason. Don't look up to find God, don't dip my prayers off with Jesus. It's less time for praying, right now it's practice your preaching, cause ain't no hiding or seeking when face to face with your demons. The killers and the reapers can smell the fear when they see you, so by all means, check your demeanor. I really mean it. Any given day, not just Sunday, catch Willie beaming. Touchdown with something dope, clean and soap thrown up on my jeans. And
so now that I have scared you and myself to death, now it's time to talk about the dawn and why I think this is actually a really great moment in human history. I'm not going to do that the whole thing where I say, crisis equals opportunity and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not an accelerationist, and I do my best at every turn to try and prevent bad things from happening to myself and to everyone. But here we are. And since we're here, it's important to think about what is going to come from this. The only way out is through. I'm going to repeat that. The only way out is through. We can't go back. There's no place to go back to. Everything behind us is either poisoned or crumbled. Everything behind us is a myth that we believed for far too long. Everything about us is a lie that we told to ourselves to keep going and to prevent us having to drastically change everything that we know and everything about the way that we live. Behind us is the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus. Behind us is nothing. What's ahead of us? Okay. What's ahead of us, and why I'm calling it the Red Dawn, is that the term socialism, communism, all these terms, as poisoned as they have been by people who intentionally poison them to prevent people from looking at the class consciousness necessary to actually get us to a better society. But as poisoned as those terms are, socialism is the natural state of humans. And I bet you can see that now, right? In your neighborhood, among your neighbors. Haven't you communicated more with your neighbors than you ever have before? I certainly hope you have. I have. And if you haven't, be the one to start a video chat, a video Zoom with your neighbors and talk about what you're going to do in the upcoming days and weeks and months. That right there is an excellent example of what I mean. How we generally are supposed to survive on this world, on this earth, is by pooling resources with the people closest to us, by using as little as we need, by doing as much as we can, by open-handedly and open-heartedly giving of ourselves and receiving from others in turn. And we're going to need to do that right now. As systems collapse, as people become sick, what you're going to see is that people are just going to step up and do the right things. Right? Yes, there will be panic. And I mean real panic, not like people buying too much toilet paper. I'm talking about real, genuine panic. Like rioting. Like looting. Which, side note, they usually only call it looting when it's black people. Otherwise, they call it getting supplies. But, well, let's just leave that one alone for now. You're going to see that. But what you're also going to see is that some of those people who are doing the looting, they're going to take that stuff back to their building and they're going to share it out. And I'm going to give you a piping hot take right now. Looting, when there is a complete breakdown of services, that's not, like, if you think that's a crime, you have just absolutely deep-throated the capitalist line. You really think that stuff sitting in stores that nobody can buy, can get to, or has money to buy is worth more than the people that it will save to get them that stuff? I want you to really think about that. A lot of people still think of crime like we used to think about drugs back in the Reagan days, right? All drugs are bad. You know, weed is the same thing as heroin, is the same thing as crack. It's all bad. No, most crime is caused by circumstance. Most of it. Most of it. And the more you push people and give them no option, then they're going to do what they got to do. And that's what I call it. When you're stealing because you live in a city where no one grows anything and where there's literally no way to get any food and you have no job, stealing is essentially a moral responsibility. Are you supposed to just sit there in some sort of like one of those monks that set themselves on fire and just burn to death? Like, are you just supposed to sit there while your family starves and cries around you? Of course not. Of course not. And only people who could possibly moralize about doing such a thing are people who have never actually had that existential fear. Right? If you've ever been food insecure, you know exactly what looting means. What so-called looting means. But at any rate, we are going to see cooperation on a scale that we have not seen before. And in fact, some of us have seen it before. You know, if you think back in New York, I believe I mentioned this in a previous episode, but if you think back to Superstorm Sandy, there were not enough government services. But you know what people did? They just pitched in, and it was beautiful to see. Everything from directing traffic when there were no lights to making sure that people were getting what they need. And that's what we're going to need to do now. But here's the thing, and here's the thing that's actually wonderful about this. What we do now, the things we set up and do now, these can be permanent systems. These can be things that endure into the new world that we're about to create. right? We're going to need that neighborhood, that block, that building group that you're starting now. You're going to really, really need that when someone who lives in apartment 6F has no food and they're really sick and they really need someone to get food to them or they're going to die, right? You're going to need that neighborhood group to be like, okay, well, I still have a job and I still have money in the bank. And if money is still worth anything, of course, but that's that's a different story. But we're going to have to be the ones to step in and take care of each other. And that's what we should have been doing this whole time. And that's kind of beautiful. Another thing, a lot of us, especially I would say, people my age and younger, there's been so much discussion and talking and dreaming about communes and living together with like a squad of people, a bunch of people in one big house. Maybe you'd buy some land somewhere and set up a community, start a farm, do that whole thing, put up some solar panels and just live off the land. That's not some sort of weird dream that's untenable. That's actually, I feel like that's our collective soul's wish for the way that we really should have been living the whole time. We were not meant to be living in little tiny apartments siloed away from each other. And as much as that's something we have to do now, this is kind of the last time we should ever consider this as the normal way of living. And we have the opportunity to see that this is the end of that. One of the ways that we will be able to get through this, like victory gardens during World War II, I believe it was. Everybody who starts putting seeds in now, it's the 22nd of March. This is the perfect time to start putting some seeds in right now, to start making some local gardens right now. And you may think that I'm being hysterical, but even if I'm wrong, what would be the problem with every single apartment building in the city that has accessible roof space? What would be the problem with each building having a rooftop garden? Why would that be bad? What could possibly be bad about that? Right? Start one today. Start it. And obviously you'll have to do social distancing while you do it, but figure it out. Figure out how you can make it happen. And for legal reasons, I can't really suggest that you just start growing things in your local park. But if I could legally, I might. The other thing, one of the big divides between the supposed left and right has been the idea of gun control. Look, here's the thing. A lot of us don't like to think about the fact that bad things can happen and that there are bad people out there with bad intentions. And I'm not talking about the ones that are just trying to grab some quick food and run because they're hungry or they have people to feed. I'm talking about people with actual dark intentions. And we don't do a good job of protecting ourselves or thinking about protecting ourselves from those things. Call this a controversial thing to say, but I feel like everyone, especially women living alone, should have a bed knife. And look, I don't see anything wrong with that being a thing. Yes, I wish we lived in a world where it was just absolutely not possible that anyone would try and do you harm. But that's not the world we live in. And that's not a world that ever we have lived in, right? Will there be a time when there is... Now listen, I think that we are heading towards a time when there is much less crime that comes as a result of desperation. Because when this system collapses and we all swear to never let something so grotesque and something that steals all the resources of the planet from around us while we watch, while we swear that that's never going to happen again, there will always be a tiny fraction of people, and I sincerely believe that fewer than 1% of human beings genuinely want to do harm just for its own sake, just by the law of numbers. Just because that's a thing that happens, there probably always will be some bad people. Look, start thinking about protecting yourself, right? What if there is a situation where you can't just dial 911? And obviously, people of color have thought about that long ago because, in a lot of neighborhoods, you call 911 and nothing happens. Public Enemy wrote 911 as a joke a long time ago. So this is not necessarily new information, but if it's new to you, think about how you will protect yourselves and your friends, right? If you live on a first floor that has no bars on the windows, straight up think about getting them or doing something of that nature. And I'm not saying that to frighten you. I'm saying that because we have to start protecting ourselves and each other because there are dark days coming. But another aspect of the Red Dawn, the socialist awakening, the planet-friendly awakening that's coming, the Earth has been healing quickly. Since we have slowed down, the world over, you've been able to see nature coming back and thriving. Clearer skies, better air, cleaner water, just from a few weeks of humans scaling back their efforts. Now, the concept that humans are a virus is, and I'll be the first to admit that it's something I have said in my more edgy moments. We're not a virus. We're not. Most of us are good. Most of us are like, at very least, neutral. But most humans are pretty good. And no matter how pessimistic or misanthropic you are, that's true. Now, don't get me wrong. The evil people do get around. They get around a lot. And they affect a lot of people. They hurt a lot of people. But the average person you're in line with at the supermarket, the average person you're behind on the highway, the average person who is also trying to get into the subway, they're just trying to live as best they can. Provide a little love, provide for their families, and generally just live a nice life. The conditions that we have become accustomed to are barbaric. It is so cruel to most people in the world to hear about how we don't go to the doctor because we're afraid of the bill, how we don't call an ambulance because we'd rather, if we have to, get an Uber or take a taxi, because when we're at our lowest points in life, we're still like, no, I can't afford to have my life saved in a truck driven by professionals because it's going to cost too much. Can you just think about, step outside of the America that we grew up in, step outside of how used to it we are, and just think about that for a while. That is cripplingly cruel. Medicine that you need for life, right? Diabetics are rationing their insulin, some of them dying because they just didn't get enough. And it's not like there's a shortage of it. The Red Dawn that is about to come over the horizon is one that is post-scarcity. And yes, while there might be literal scarcity for a while, what I'm talking about is the artificial scarcity that has been caused by a small group of people having control over all the resources. Right? Scarcity, like the fact that there is so much corn grown in this country that is not even intended to be eaten by people. It's intended to make high fructose corn syrup, or to be fed to cows who have no business eating corn, or for some other purpose. All the places where there's all that corn, there should be a healthy and robust variety of vegetables being grown. Heterogeneity leads to brittleness, which leads to scarcity. And that's true all across nature. You can see it. Even, for example, gentrification. You can see New York City even changing day by day, becoming more and more homogeneous. I think I said the wrong thing a little bit ago. I said heterogeneous when I meant homogenous. But anyway, New York City is becoming more homogenous, right? It used to be, growing up, did I want to go to that coffee shop on 3rd Avenue where there was they had really great music. They played punk rock in the store and they had this great Sumatran coffee that was really lovely. Or do I want to go to the other coffee store that's like 5 blocks away where they usually play jazz and where there's like a nice older black woman who I feel like is my aunt, right? No, now, are you going to Starbucks, right? That is a kind of homogeneity of experience that leads to brittleness, because what happens is Starbucks goes under. It all goes down. You see what I'm saying? New York used to be great because every 5 blocks was like a new city. But now, even though, don't get me wrong, I love how different New York neighborhoods still are, the rot has already begun. And every 10 blocks is starting to look like the next 10 blocks, all the way up and down the island, and all the way out into Brooklyn and Queens as well. It's a bank, it's a Starbucks. Maybe a Staples in there every now and again. Throw in a Whole Foods, right? Everything is acquiring a sameness that is, frankly, not normal for nature. Nature wants diversity. Diversity is how you have health. Where there is diversity, there is strength. If everyone on my block were a super duper bodybuilder, we would have no problems, for example, physically fighting off an enemy that came and tried to, maraud our block. But what if the problem was that we needed to crawl through a drain pipe to survive, or we needed someone to crawl through a drain pipe and go unlock a gate? We would all die. Everyone brings something different to the table. And we should never seek for everything to be the same, for there to be a homogeneous way of looking at things. And that's the world that we have now, but it will not be the world that we're going to. Because when this is all said and done, people will choose who they want to be around and the lives they want to live and how they're going to conduct those lives and how they're going to make it work. And that means you're going to have a lot of happier people, right? People will be happier doing the things for which they genuinely feel like they are called and how they genuinely want to be spending their time. I feel like some of us are getting a taste of that now. And I think we're still a little bit in the shock phase where, a lot of us are still wandering around without pants for days on end, like barely remembering how to speak to other humans and, standing over the sink, eating things out of a tin because we're just super disoriented, right? But as that wears off, we're going to start doing things that we really feel called to do. And that's how you create happiness. Because the things that people say about laziness and about people not wanting to work, et cetera, okay, that's partially true. But it's also that the type of work that is available to them, they're not supposed to be doing. They're not made for, right? Office jobs are not for most people. It's soul-crushing and stultifying to most spirits to just sit somewhere punching buttons all day. And now we're seeing another fantastic thing about what the world that's coming. Now we're seeing what jobs really are essential. Now we're seeing what jobs really are important. And now we're getting to see where the power really should lie, right? Because I know a lot of you working for, the Googles and a lot of you working office jobs, working in finance, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of y'all motherfuckers are sitting at home basically useless. And I'm not saying this to be rude, but it's because your jobs were essentially creations of this society made to prop itself up. They were not made because they are necessary or because they're good. And not all of you, but some of you have bought into the fact that you're more important than a baker, that you're more important than a delivery person, that you're more important than a healthcare worker or a garbage person. And you know what? You're not. You're not, and you ain't never been. And you never will be again. And I hope that you can see that now. Right? Making more money is a trick of the light. Making more money is probably because of the education you were able to have and, how you look, where you were born, a bunch of stuff that makes your particular piece fit into the machinery that we currently have. But it is not a mark of virtue. It is not a mark of merit. What the Red Dawn also will bring to us is it will bring the true leaders out. A lot of people are leaders because they're beautiful. A lot of people are leaders because, they have the characteristics that people associate with leadership. You look at someone like, say, Beto O'Rourke. He's tall. People think he's good looking. He knows how to speak like a politician. But you can look in that dude's eyes and see that he would rather be hanging out skateboarding, shooting the shit, maybe playing in a band, maybe doing something more creative. But because of how he looks and because of the circumstances in which he's found himself, politics seemed like the way to go. But that's not what that dude really wants or needs in life to be happy. And you can definitely tell by watching him that he knows that too. We will get to be authentic. And also, one of the things this period is going to do for example, courtship and dating. Now look, I'm a sex positive person, and I believe that people should be fucking each other every day and twice on a Wednesday and 3 times on a Friday. You know what I mean? Like, I believe in exploring the body and exploring sexuality, but the way that we do courtship nowadays is terrible. The fact that so many people just pop onto Tinder or Grindr or OkCupid or whatever it is that you go on and sort of shop through humans to find someone to, to date or to have sex with or to just, satiate the kind of weird emptiness the society makes us feel. Now we're about to actually see who you actually care about, who you actually want to talk to, who you want to spend time with just because you enjoy spending time with them. And that's because you won't be able to see them. You won't be able to touch them. So if somebody is communicating with you for, the months that it will take before you can meet up in person, it may be less than that. There will be a brief side note. After a period of isolation, social distancing, over the next couple of weeks, we will see who gets sick and who doesn't. And people who are symptom-free and have been inside in the same quarantine or isolation pod for 2 weeks will be able to go and hang out with other people who have been through the same process. And you'll probably still need to stay there, but this period won't be forever. Just for people who are feeling lonely and feeling like they're not, they're going to have a hard time getting through this, people who are extroverted, etc. Give it like 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll be able to change things around a little bit. Don't get me wrong, other situations will be going on, but at very least that. But at any rate, for love, for courtship, right? You're going to spend the next month like flirty talking, just sharing deep things, because there's only so much small talk you can do when your days look so similar, right? You're going to actually have to get deep with people. And some of us, myself included, are going to have to just really open themselves up, because nobody is going to want to keep talking to you about the weather. People are going to want to know the raw stuff of you, to quote Jawbreaker. And you're going to be able to find new ways to surprise and delight each other. And that's beautiful. And also it's something that should have been happening more, right? I feel like in the pendulum swings between the sort of 50s sex negative, heteronormative, and monogamy focused way that society was running, there was that. And then we kind of swing wildly into the Tinder world where like fucking someone is just a few swipes away. There is a middle ground there. And it's a huge middle ground. And it's, yes, we should be enjoying each other physically. And no, there is no problem at all and no shame and nothing wrong with 2 or 3 or whatever number of people doing whatever they want to do together. But don't you have a little bit of don't you wish there was more romance? You know, don't you want to be loved and chosen and regarded highly? Don't you want that? Right? That is something that especially people who are acculturated male, we are often taught that, that we have to go out and get a partner, and it's not about us feeling like we're wanted, us feeling loved, us feeling held. We have been cut off from our divine feminine, and that means that we are not doing a good job of getting our deep needs met, which makes us much shittier at being lovers to anyone. And it also causes the average male person to view women as something to be won. And that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a union. You're supposed to come together. However you want to take that. But you're supposed to come together. Supposed to meet in the middle, right? And yeah, there is something beautiful about the pursuit game and, a little bit of back and forth like that, and the deliciousness of flirtation and the uncertainty and the growing realization that there is a mutual attraction and all of the stages of that go into it. And all that's awesome. And this is going to be a time when we get to explore that more. Another aspect of the world that is to come, that we're going to co-create. We are seeing the rules for a society. And the rules for a society that we have known have been woefully wrong. The society that we have known, that we have thought of, has basically been geared towards earning, getting, making, and moving forward at all costs. But the rules did not include A, living well is a human right. Food is a human right. Healthcare is a human right. Housing is a human right. These are the baselines of society. Otherwise, there is no point to the collective experiment of humanity. If the things that will keep you alive and well are not things that are provided at no cost by the society in which you are born, you live in a sick society. And that is a lesson that we must never, ever forget. Whatever we tell the children that we may or may not have, we must tell them that the baseline for every society is that you need not worry for the base things that you need. You need not worry that you will be taken care of. You need not worry if that you will be left to die, literally left to die, if you don't have money. The sick and sad world that we live in today is going to come crashing down, and it will leave us only with the building blocks to create a just, measured, and loving world. Love is the primary engine of anything that involves social animals, humans especially. We're all going to have to be, and we're all, not have to be. We're all going to get to be more authentic. Yeah, you might be stuck with somebody for a while right now through this trouble period. And this trouble period, it's going to last probably 2 or 3 years. But beyond that is the glorious dawn of a time when you can say, you know what? I don't have to do any of the stuff that my parents told me that I was going to have to do, that society has told me I was going to have to do. I don't have to put up with these people who don't feed my soul. If my family is toxic to me, I will just leave them and go find other people who are like-minded and like-hearted to live with. All the rules are broken. And that's a very, very good thing. The red dawn on our horizon is the world that we have been working towards as a species since we kind of started doing this whole thing. And don't get me wrong, we should not leave behind a lot of the advancements. another one of the things we're learning now is that electricity, the internet, etc., those are all human rights. Why? Because you need them to live well. And also because they don't cost a lot to make. I mean, let's keep it real, right? In, again, other countries, phone service, internet service, it's all cheap. It's basically cheap or free in most developed countries that have it. The internet is essentially the collective unconscious made flesh. It's just such a beautiful thing. And that will never go away, right? We need that to stay connected to each other, and we should. But there are lots of things about our society that need to go. I want you to think about right now, and think about it seriously. If you live in a city and you don't have another place to go, think about what you would do if things didn't get better. Think about it good and hard. Think about who you would ask to come and stay with you for protection, or vice versa, to whom you would go. Think about what you can do outside of finding that job that you had before, or finding some low-wage job to survive. Honestly, think about strategies for survival wherever you are. If you can leave the city, I highly recommend doing it, quite honestly. I'm prepared for it, but a lot of people aren't. And when I say things are going to get bad here, look, I was a kid in the 80s. And the 80s were nothing compared to the 70s. The 70s were, by all accounts, absolutely terrifying, right? But the 80s were no picnic either. Shootings, muggings, robbings, all kinds of stuff like that was commonplace. And the level of desperation following this crisis is going to be worse than that. And it's going to be worse because it's not people who are geared towards criminality, but people who have just been pushed so far that they have no other choice. Or at least they can't see one. So I want you to have the hard talk with yourself. What if there is no going back? What if the only way out is through? What if the new normal is coming, but it's going to come at the other end of a hard fight? Think about that seriously. And during this time, talk to people about it. If there's people who don't believe that America is going to collapse or that it could, convince them otherwise. And like I always say, you can tell them, laugh at me later, but let's talk about this now. Because I love you and I want you to be safe, no matter what happens. And I want you in the world that is going to come. So how are we going to do it? After the black swan comes the red dawn. And I want you all to be there with me in it. Because the world that's coming is the best one yet. I believe that, and I can't be convinced otherwise. That will bring us to the end of this episode of the Focused on Infinity podcast. My Patreon is now live, and I would greatly appreciate your support as I navigate what I'm going to be doing since my main business is now no longer. It's on Patreon, Focused on Infinity. Also, please do follow me on Instagram at Focused on Infinity and Twitter at Watcher Infinite. Much love to everyone. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. And for now, stay the fuck home. Can we do that? Social distancing will save lives. Grendel out.